To introduce Angela. Angela Dunne is the managing partner of Dunne, where her career has focused exclusively on divorce-related work. Ms. Dunne is a fellow of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. She was also appointed by the Chief Justice of the Nebraska Supreme Court to serve on the Nebraska Child Support Advisory Commission and served on the NSBA Ad Hoc Committee to discuss the Parenting Act issues which were raised in the Nebraska legislature. In 2013, Angela co-authored the second edition of Divorce in Nebraska, The Legal Process, Your Rights, and What to Expect with Susan Ann Koenig, and she received her JD from the University of Nebraska College of Law. Please welcome Angela.
You. So people can see me, right, on video? So when I'm photographed normally, they tell me to like turtle my face out and I'm going to forget to do that. So I'm apologizing to everybody online who's just going to have to deal with my double chin. So as was mentioned in the introduction, I've been practicing exclusively divorce and custody work since 2000. I've been with Susan Koenig since 1999, and this is the only practice I've ever known. My first consultation as a divorce lawyer was with a gentleman who came in and had a 7-year-old son, and I must have asked him something about, what are you most worried about? And he said, well, I'm gay and I don't know how that's going to impact my case. As a brand new lawyer, I could in moments figure out how did that happen. Like that's how young and naive I was. So needless to say, in the almost 20 years after that, I've learned quite a bit about what families look like, how they interact, and hopefully I've picked up some wisdom along the way. So started in practice. My background prior to going to law school, I worked in a domestic violence shelter. So I've really have been focused on families for the duration of my career. I'll tell you in 2004 and again in 2006, I became a mom. So you're going to hear me talk about Anna, who is now 14, and Sophia, who just turned 12 last Friday. In 2011, their dad and I got divorced. And so I had been practicing divorce law for several years, well, a decade leading up. And as any of you who are practitioners or custody practitioners know, having children deepens the understanding of what clients are going through. I used to say, well, you'll just alternate holidays. Well, then I had kids and I kind of got like, oh, what I'm saying could be pretty traumatic. I wouldn't want to share my holidays, right? And then in 2011, I was faced with the reality of that then being my situation. So my girls were 5 and 7 when their dad and I divorced. So my youngest would have just been starting kindergarten. And my oldest likes to say that for her 7th birthday, we got divorced. So trust me, I've dealt with the hardship of how children will experience it, as well as kind of looking objectively from the legal side. I will say legally I had it very easy. My former spouse obviously knew what my career was and said, I know you'll take care of our family. So it was the best type of divorce you can have. I was the only lawyer. So anyway, so that's been my world for the last 7 years. A couple of years, or maybe within the year that I started actively co-parenting, I started writing a blog for our law firm. It had nothing to do with legal advice. It really focused exclusively on the experience because now I was right in the middle of it with 2 school-age children, and I was realizing how hard it was. So I just started blogging every week, talking about what was hard this week in co-parenting. I've been blogging every week for 7 years, and I'm never at a loss for topics. So if that gives you kind of any idea into the complexity of what living under a divorce decree can mean, like I said, there's no shortage of material. So a couple of years ago, it had been brought to my attention that perhaps a book would be useful for parents. So I spent a year writing a book that was just released a couple of weeks ago. It still feels very surreal, but it's called Patched Up Parenting. And I'm not here necessarily to promote the book, but why I'm mentioning that is that I immersed myself in both the legal hat and the parent hat on what was I observing, how could lawyers be better, how could parents be better, and ultimately leading to a better experience for children. So I've been pretty passionate about that project for the last year or so, and that's kind of the scope and the foundation for which I stand before you today to kind of talk about what I've learned, how I think we can be better, and I certainly want to answer any questions that you all might have. So before I kind of launch into, as I promised, some practical tools and tips that way, are there any questions that you all have before we start that you want me to make sure that I address during our hour today? Anything that you're all thinking about? Okay, well, hopefully there will be questions and the shyness will dissipate here in the next couple of minutes. So, all right, I want to talk first about parenting plans. So how many of you just in this room are family law practitioners? Okay. Okay, great. Well, so you're familiar with parenting plans, certainly. Are any of you practicing in Douglas County or all in counties that do not have a conciliation court?
I'm in Douglas County.
Okay, so the only distinction to note related to parenting plans is that in Douglas County, we have a conciliation court where we have to get mandatory approval of all of our parenting plans. They have their own separate checklist of things that we have to go through to make sure that our parenting plan will be approved. So I want to just kind of open it up here. When you're not in Douglas County, are there any set parameters or required paragraphs or provisions other than what's incorporated into the Nebraska Parenting Act that you need to make sure that you include? No? Okay. So in the materials, I provided a sample parenting plan questionnaire that we provide to all of our clients. And this is to help either facilitate them having a conversation with their soon-to-be co-parent, to take to mediation, just for them to kind of understand, oh, okay, these are the things we're going to be talking about. You'll see in here that we make no mention of the financial aspects. Custody, it's exclusively what would be presented in the parenting plan. We've spent years putting this parenting plan questionnaire together because every time we get a new situation, we think, oh, about that. You know, for example, I want to say in the last year we added, what should people do when the half or step siblings have birthdays, because we had conflict come up out of that and thought we should be clarifying. So every time we kind of have one of those nuances, we just dump it into the parenting plan questionnaire, for better or worse, because sometimes then I think we can overthink and we give parents a lot more to chew on than maybe they would otherwise. Other times we will pat ourselves on the back thinking, oh, we've just saved them a ton of heartache in the future because we're eyes wide open looking at it and addressing it moving forward. So what I find to be most helpful off of the questionnaire is that you'll see that we've just, in the first 2 pages, defined legal custody for parents so that they understand what it means. In my experience, that seems to be the most complicated or confusing idea for parents in what does legal custody mean. And how many of you have experienced clients who just come in and say, I want legal custody? And they don't even really know what they're talking about. That's just what they want. Or they say, I want sole custody. And they don't understand there's a distinction there for decision making or parenting time. Because what they're saying is, I'm scared out of my mind and I want my kids, right? That's code for what that really means. So I found it helpful helpful to start breaking down the mystery and the definitions of what it means to have joint custody versus sole custody, and really at the end of the day what that means. So you all know in this room that legal custody really pertains to major decision making for healthcare, religion, education. Then they'll say, well, who gets to decide when my daughter gets her ears pierced? What happens if my ex thinks that my son should get a tattoo when he's 16, right? None of that has to do with legal custody. And yet that's the stuff that we get called upon all the time, because the truth, most of the time in healthcare, there aren't many decisions that parents don't go along with the recommendation of the physician or the pediatrician. Religion generally has been established. That seems to be the area that tends to come up in more practical ways. And education, certainly, then there can be a dispute. Mostly it's related to boundaries of so-and-so parent wants to move out of the neighborhood, move into a different one, and how is that impacting school? But really, once those decisions have been made, it's more the other decision making that parents have to make together that can be quite complicating. So to that end, you'll see in the parenting plan questionnaire, we've tried to address a lot of the topics that seem to be triggers for families. Have them start thinking about the future where there might be a step family involved. Have them start thinking about the involvement that they want the extended family to be in, so that you can start engaging with your clients in the conversations about what they can and cannot do, what they can and cannot control. I just sent an email this morning to a client who's upset that soon-to-be ex-wife has already moved in a live-in boyfriend, and can we control that, and can he charge him rent, can he start charge him a storage? Creative here we're getting, and then I have to say no. The most we could maybe do is put some kind of limitation on overnight parenting time to exclude an unrelated party, but you guys get to parent how you're going to parent. You get the same kind of freedom. So I want to talk about things that I've seen that work well in parenting plans and provisions that I think are not helpful. What I've seen work really well is a lot of detail. And what we'll find with parents is that they simultaneously want control and flexibility. And that kind of dichotomy, right? And they want it inside a plan that makes sense. They can laminate and like cross off and, you know, show to the police or their former spouse in any situation that might benefit them. So we've tried to prepare our parenting plans such that it doesn't allow for vagueness, confusion, or any ambiguity, because that's when parents will fight. And these are, we most often see challenges with the drafting or where we think we can make it better. So I will say, how many of you tend to use the right of first refusal provision? Yeah, a couple. And when you're using the right of first refusal provision, what's the hour limit that tends to be most common?
Overnight.
Overnight, great.
I don't usually put an hour.
Okay. It was common practice for a while, at least in Douglas or Sarpy County, to have maybe 4 hours or 6 hours. I hate the right of first refusal provision. If it were up to me, I would have it no less than an overnight or 12 hours, or because this is an area where people will fight and unknowingly involve their children in the litigation, because the only way that they'll know if their kids weren't with their parent like they were supposed to be is to engage the kids in that kind of dialogue, you know. So that's a provision. I understand it. I mean, I get it. If my former spouse can't be with my kids and they're going to spend the day with their stepmom, in the early days, that would have been like nails on a chalkboard for me, right? Like, they're my children. They should be with me. I'm their mom. But I started to realize over time that then my girls would never get to spend the day with my parents if I needed to be away, and to help facilitate that. And then what happens is the kids are only ever with their parents. I don't know. I just think there's a better way to do that. And I think there's a better way than to have kids policing the time. So I guess one of the things that I would recommend is that we're extending out the right of first refusal, if not eliminating it altogether. So I'd love to get feedback or questions from anybody on kind of my thoughts around that. The other area where we tend to see a lot of dispute arise is in the vacation and the holiday provisions. And why is that? A lot of plans that get drafted create confusion over the resetting of regular parenting time. So what we tend to do when we've got a plan either that comes to us from a mediator or the clients filled out the questionnaire and said kind of this is what I want, we link it then to the regular parenting time, and we'll prepare like a dummy schedule for 6 months and kind of see how that would work. Like what would that look like in real life? And I think a lot of times lawyers are not taking that extra step to look at the reality that the plan is going to create so that you can start making adjustments or clarifying. What we'll often find is people go into the plans, and I will tell you, moving through a divorce, probably the year after a divorce, you've seen it. I've lived it. You're in kind of a fog. You're just kind of getting through, right? So I just wanted to make sure that my kids wouldn't be crying every day, was the truth. Like if I could get them to school with a lunchbox and their hair kind of combed, I didn't care if they had matching socks. I was way over that. But I felt like, who's handing me my award when I've done drop-off successfully and that they're kind of presenting well in school? I was not thinking about the holiday schedule in my parenting plan and what that might create in the future. And this was what I did for a living. Like this was my foreign language, so to speak, that I'm fairly fluent in. So even I, years later, would think, why did we write it like that? That doesn't make any sense. Or what were we thinking, right? So I think it's incumbent upon the lawyers or the mediators to actually chart it out and say, this is potentially what it could look like. Because what we'll see happen, all of a sudden parents will realize, oh, the way we drafted it, they're going to get 3 weekends in a row with the other parent. I'm going to miss out on 3 weekends in a row. Easy to avoid if we had just been looking at it. And it's easy not to. It's easy just to do, okay, you're going to get 2 weeks of vacation in the summer or throughout the year. And parents will get very, very creative. I would caution against vacation periods that can be taken in any increment less than 5 days. So we had parents put together a parenting plan, 14 days of vacation could be used in 1 day increments. So you know what dad did? And I'm not picking on moms over dads. Both, trust me, both sets, moms and dads, can be equally vindictive and manipulative. Dad picked a vacation day every Saturday in the summer that wasn't his time so that mom never had a full weekend, and completely allowable under the parenting plan, right? So then mom's coming back like, what happened? Like nobody thought of this, right? So you want to be really careful when you're doing anything outside of the regular parenting schedule that will cause a reset or some kind of adjustment. Does that make sense? Any questions, comments?
Let's say mediator standpoint, whiteboards and flip charts are great for locking these things up when it comes to actually doing our routine parenting times or holidays. That's normally my go-to. Okay, we're going to draw up.
Perfect.
This is what it looks like.
Perfect.
Oh.
So the comment from our mediator in the room was that whiteboards and flip charts are the go-to tool. And not only should that be the tool for mediators, it should be the tool for the lawyers who are reviewing the plans and supporting their clients to look at it. Because as he said, clients will go, oh, wait a minute, we wouldn't want that outcome, right? And then you have to do it kind of both ways, because parents will see a year that it would be advantageous to them, not realizing the flip side, that in the opposite year, it would go the other way. So you kind of have to work through it both ways. We provide to our clients, and I'd be happy to email this to anybody who wanted it, when I'm talking about just regular routine parenting time. We have probably 6 or 7 of the most common scenarios of parenting time we see be awarded. So we start with Wednesdays every other weekend, and then we kind of go into that compromise where it's Wednesdays every other weekend, but dad has the Thursday when he doesn't have the weekend. And then we go into some of the common joint custody parenting time schedules. We give that at the consult so that people can start thinking about, what does time look like? Because I'll tell you, as a parent who's experienced this, and again, I had the best case scenario. We were going to split time 50-50. There was just no other way we were going to do it. And the idea of sharing your children, of not having them 100% of the time, is just not natural. So I don't know that I'll ever get used to it. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy my quiet weekends sometimes, but I'll tell you what, by Monday, I'm like antsy for them to come back and to, crowd up my life. And like I said, they're 14 and 12, so they never stop talking. But it's just not normal for parents. And so to start being able to process, what is this going to look like? Because that's what they're most afraid of, moms and dads alike. Any comments about parenting plan? Okay. So to some of the other provisions that I think wise to be included. So we've already talked about create the visual for your clients, really look at the right of first refusal, and I would recommend avoiding that just being a standard clause that you put in. Pay attention to vacation and holiday times, and then you really do kind of want to look at as forward into the future as you can related to the family dynamics. So I'm sure you've all had the cases where people come in and say, I absolutely want a prohibition against my kid spending any time with Uncle Bobby because he's a drug addict, or he was in jail, or he wears funny clothes. Whatever reason they'll give you. And we absolutely must engaging in the conversation with our clients about that. And I'm going to talk about some tools that I have to do that on the client side. But if this is something critically important to your client, make sure that you're having that conversation either with the mediator or with opposing counsel just to get it out there. We know sometimes we avoid those conversations because it can be uncomfortable. We can think, oh God, I'm not going to let this one issue tie up the litigation. I'm just going to kind of move something or push something forward. But that's where clients will ultimately, parents will hold on to that. And they won't trust the stability or the credibility of their parenting plan if they feel like their concerns for their children have not been addressed. So again, I'm guilty of it too, where I'll think, oh my gosh, is this really what I went to law school for, was to talk about why somebody can't spend time, or, whatever it is in the plan. But I know that I have happier clients when I actually pay attention to what it is they're most concerned about. So going to that, I have, through the course of writing the book, because it made me really look at what do I think parents should be considering and how can lawyers help. I prepared this list of questions that's in the materials that you can use to help interview your clients, or give them these questions to put in their own toolbox. So I'm actually going to go through and read these. I know sometimes that can be annoying, like sitting in front of you and you can read it yourself, but I want to talk about the impact. I want you all to ask questions and what if they respond with this? Because we could do some of that role playing if you want and kind of look at it. So when creating a parenting plan, ask yourself this. And again, this is for parents. This is for parents to consider when developing their plan. What am I most worried about? It goes to the point that I just talked about. We really need to be pinpointing and addressing what parents are most worried about. They need to hear that somebody understands. So they're going to say, I'm worried about not having my kids. I'm worried about not having enough time with my kids. I'm worried about the time that they're going to spend with their other parent because I've been doing all of the parenting and their other parent knows nothing. But to be engaging in the dialogue about, okay, let's look at the worries. What can you control? Because again, that's what they want. They want control. And how can you behave kind of in the face of these worries? I would have them ask, what is the most important issue to be addressed? So you start prioritizing, right? So what is most important? What are the next two in order? And so you start setting up your client or the parent for success by identifying, because you know they might have 27 things that they think should be in their parenting plan, because again, they're desperate to control like every piece of it. Have them focusing on the top 3 things that are most important, because I'll tell you, usually it sounds like, I want my child to be safe. I want my child to know they're loved. I want to spend time. We can guarantee that's going to happen inside of a parenting plan, usually. If their top priority is something not in line with the children and more about the dispute between the spouses, you can encourage them to look at that, right? So a good follow-up question to whatever it is that clients say, if you're thinking, that wouldn't necessarily be my priority, is, and what would that get you? What would that provision get you? And you start going into the conversation a little bit deeper. I always ask them or have them evaluate what scares you. Like, what do you, so we've got your worries, but what scares you about the parenting plan or about sharing time? Is it the transportation? Is it the exchange? I'm lucky in my situation, we do all of our exchanges at school. And I will tell you, 7 years in, and I would have hoped 7 years wiser, although it doesn't necessarily tend to be the case. Anytime my spouse or my former spouse picks up the and takes them away, I will get a moment of getting all choked up about it. Still, so, I mean, this has probably happened a dozen times to me, and I will still get sad about it. So you want to ask your clients what scares you, what makes you sad about it, so that they can really start processing their feeling through it. No questions? Okay. What are my intentions with respect to how I treat my children? I think this is a great question for parents, because they will say, I want my children to be respected, I want them to be treated fairly, while at the same time they might be saying, I want to limit their time with their dad or mom as much as possible. Well, let's look at that, right? So a lot of times what's hard for parents coming into a divorce situation is the family unit had a structure and everybody had their roles. And so whether it was dad cooked dinner every night or mom did baths and kind of the bedtime routine, that's all going to change. And I tell moms this a lot, and I don't mean any disrespect to dads in the room, but dads become better dads as a result of divorce. That's been my experience with my own former spouse, and I know he would not be offended, and he would say that that's the truth. But I feel like I became a better parent too, because I had to be more flexible, and I had to kind of roll with things, and I couldn't be in control of everything anymore. So when it comes to the intentions for your children, really to be asking them, if they're talking negatively about their former spouse, what is your intention for your children around that? Wake them up, right? Wake them up into thinking about, oh, I forgot. They love their mom, dad, no matter what. And we need to start doing that sooner rather than later, I believe, in the process. I will often ask or have them consider, how important will this be for me in 6 months, in a year, in 5 years? They'll get really attached to something in the moment. Again, address that concern, have them move through it. But then perspective building is another useful tool. Like, how important will this be? A same version of what are my intentions with respect to how I treat my children? How will this affect my children? And so again, Parents will tell you over and over again the thing that they're most concerned about going through divorce is my children. They would put that top of the list every time and have them go into the communication about how will this affect my children. I'm going to jump down to kind of the holiday parenting time because I want to tell you a story that was a great learning for me and reshaped how I kind of thought about things, and it was completely unintentional. So I love holidays. I'm a complete fanatic about holidays. I've got a wreath for multiple places at my house with Halloween, Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day is a big one. Like, I just am all about holidays. So the idea of having a 5-year-old and 7-year-old who still believed in the magic of Christmas, who I could still, no lie, stamp my hands in green paint and put it on the toilet seat and pretend like the leprechaun came at St. Patrick's Day was pure joy in motherhood to me, right? So dividing the holidays was just, you could not stick a knife through my heart and twist it harder because I could not comprehend having to miss out on those moments. So I was a complete, what's a good word that I can say? So needless to say, I did not show up as my best self that first year having to share holidays. So the first major holiday I didn't have with my kids was Thanksgiving. And there are some holidays where, as part of your tradition, you cannot control the way some things will land. You can control when you're going to have your turkey dinner. We've had that the Saturday before, the Saturday after. The meal can be controlled. Tell you what you cannot control. When they air the Macy's Day Parade, and when you look at all the Black Friday ads while you're watching the Macy's Day Parade, and then you watch the little dog show afterwards. Actually, by that time, we're usually falling back asleep because we got up and got excited, right? So I could plan the meal, have it on a different day, but I had to sit by myself and watch the Macy's Day Parade, and boy, did I sulk. And that Thanksgiving, I told my parents we were going to, and I'm lucky I have family that I can choose to go make miserable with me. We're going to have pizza, and like, this is just the opposite of Thanksgiving, and I was sad, and I remember I was laying on the couch and my head on my mom's lap, and she was like, it's okay. I mean, just devastated about this. So the next year rolls around, and I'm so excited because it's my Thanksgiving, and we get to do all the things, and Anna, who then is 8 by this time, says, Mom, we had Thanksgiving with you last year. And I'm like, oh, no, you didn't. And she's like, yeah, we did, remember? And she recites all of the details about the dinner that we had had on the Saturday before. In her mind, that was her Thanksgiving. And I'm like, oh, I'm an a-hole. So, like, her experience, what she remembered about Thanksgiving was exactly what I would want her to remember. Where I'm sitting in my pity party, now I'll remember that now, just mostly for the learning about it. But I share that story often with clients about, you get to create what you want your kids to remember, right? And so when we talk about how will this affect my children, well, so they're not going to have their actual birthday with you. You do your birthday on a different day. Some of those are easy, but again, that Thanksgiving, my kids could care less if they're watching the parade with me, right? All they cared about was when our whole family was together, having the meal together. So I think it's important to have parents look at, how do you create it? How do you control it? And again, it does require flexibility, maybe just not in the way they think they need it or want it. I think a great question to ask parents is, what is fair for my children? The fairness will get them every time. And one of the things that my daughter, when she got a little bit older, Anna would say, and I will say my kids went to a Catholic school in Omaha. There weren't very many divorced parents. So they didn't have a lot of friends who had divorced parents. In fact, my youngest, Sophia, doesn't have any friends or anybody in her class who has divorced parents. So they were kind of in this unique situation of not having a lot of kids to relate to. And when Anna would observe other parents or, her friends, where the parents were fighting, or the schedule was off, Anna would say, well, I like that it's fair. Like she could understand the concept of I spend as much time with mom or dad. And again, my job is not here to advocate one parenting time schedule over the other. I can see different schedules work for different families. But the fairness question is always a good one to kind of bring back to what's fair for your kids in terms of the availability they have for either parent. Is it fair for your child to make a stink at a basketball game because somebody showed up not during their parenting time, which is one of my worst pet peeves about parents trying to block other parents from being engaged in activity. So am I more concerned with being right or for what is best for my children? This comes usually post-parenting plan, like I'm right. That's how you read the parenting plan. That's just how it's going to be, and I'm going to dig my heels in the ground about that. I like to say, well, what would be best for your children? Okay. So when your co-parent asks for a change in the regular parenting schedule, this just happened to me last week. My daughter's stepmother's dad, so their step-grandpa, Grandpa Dunne is what they called him, passed away on a Saturday morning. It was their dad's weekend. And my daughter calls me hysterical. Sophia's got a soccer game that day, a volleyball game that day, and they're calling to say, can Dad drop us off there so that he can be with Stephanie? Of course, right? So I had stuff to do that day. Absolutely, we'll take my children. That's usually not the dynamic that we're stressed about, right? It's not normally that we're dealing with parents who are like, no, I don't want them. Figure something else out, right? So gladly. And was just checking in with my former spouse, like, do you want him to spend the night? What do you want to do? And he's like, I'll just let you know. We afford ourselves the luxury of that kind of flexibility. Funeral then scheduled for Tuesday. Monday and Tuesday would be my day. He says, my parents are coming to town, so my daughter's paternal grandparents and all of Stephanie's, their stepmother's extended family, can I switch Monday, Tuesday? Absolutely. We didn't even hesitate, right? And it happened to be that my daughter's birthday was Friday, and the only days that I was going to get to celebrate were those days kind of leading up. So I kind of had something planned, and they wouldn't work for the other nights because then we had soccer practice, volleyball, right? And you just have to go with it. So I could have chose in that moment to be right and to be a stickler around the plan, but what did my daughters need, right? They needed a mom who could be compassionate. They needed to be able to cry to me about Grandpa Don dying. Not me saying, well, he's not your real grandpa. Like, why are you so sad? Right? Which we've all had clients who would do that. Or who prevent the children even attending a funeral or attending a wedding. So I prepared kind of these questions for this kind of scenario. What is my intention in granting or denying the request? Are you deciding based on an assumption that you will be able to leverage something for yourself in the future? Like, ooh, if I say yes, they're for sure going to grant my request. Well, guess what? You can never guarantee that. And I tell my clients that all of the time. Are you declining because you're annoyed about a past decision your former spouse made? Well, I've got a stack of those annoyances that I could pull out. I've gathered a lot of evidence in the 7 years I've been divorced about things where I think you owe me or I extended you this favor. You choose to erase it. It's not about keeping track of points anymore. So I have clients look at, why are you making the decision that you're making today? And is it based on your children today, your children's needs today? Would this deviation from the parenting plan be good or bad for my child? It's always interesting what parents will come up with that way, but really having them look at how it would be bad or how it would be good. Am I saying no for me or for my children? And you all know more often than not, they're saying no for them. has nothing to do with the impact on the child. So again, I just think these are useful questions to hold the dialogue and hold the space for your clients to look at it. For the holiday parenting time specifically, what do I really want? You really want special moments with your kids during the holidays. You can make that happen under any parenting plan. Have your clients or the parents ask, why is it meaningful? That was a hard one for me to look at too. So in my marital residence, I lived in a neighborhood where they did a luminary night, second Sunday of every December, and the whole neighborhood would line the streets, you know, with the bags, the white bags with the candles inside. It's my favorite night of the year. So we had started having parties that night so that everybody would come into the neighborhood and see it. Well, with my divorce, I moved out of the marital home, and again, kind of already set the groundwork that I was a powder about these things, and I was not going to have a luminary. You know, I was out of the neighborhood now. I wasn't going to have the luminary party, and my girls were flabbergasted that I was not going to continue with the luminary, and I thought I had an excuse. We don't live there. They're not going to do them anymore, and they said, but that's when all of our friends and their parents come over. That's, you know, they reminded me of why that night was meaningful. It wasn't really just because we lit the luminaries. It was because that was a tradition in our family, and there was no reason not to continue with that tradition. So remind parents why the holidays or their traditions are meaningful. And then ask the question, is it meaningful for my children? A lot of times what we think as parents will be meaningful, i.e. the Macy's Day Parade and looking at the Black Friday ads, they could care less about. And then surprisingly, kids will always pick up on different things that they care about related to the holiday that you're like, I don't even remember doing that. So always good to kind of do that double check. Am I fighting over something that's meaningful for me or my mom or my brother, or is it really meaningful for my kids? Have I asked my children what they most need or what they want during the holidays? And I don't mean the presents. I mean, what do they need? And I think if we encourage parents to not be afraid of talking about divorce to our kids in kind of that healthy way, where you say, I know this year it's going to look different. It's going to feel different. What do you need? What do you want from me? In my own life, that was a really impactful conversation. I tend to have that with my girls kind of as they get older, and we're now navigating lots of drama at school, and their dad and I parent differently. And so I'll say, what do you need from me? What can I give you? And what do you need from your dad? And how are those going to be different? How are those the same? If they talk to me about their dad, you know, a lot of the things they want to keep private just with their mom because of their age and the things that are happening. I still provide tampons for my daughter at her dad's house because she's just mortified at the idea of having to say anything to her dad about it. Her dad and I, behind their backs, laugh about that. But don't be afraid to kind of acknowledge that with your co-parent or with your children. I always, when looking at the holidays, what worries am I trying to alleviate? And what joys am I trying to create? So several years in a row, we tended to do it in the fall because Christmas, we just already kind of had our set things that we just always did. We took a big poster board and we drew a big tree, and then on leaves, we wrote out kind of our bucket list items. What did we want to accomplish? Now, my girls had all kinds of ideas and could, you know, fill up the tree. And then I would look and say, okay, well, we have approximately 4 weekends to accomplish the tree. But again, that kind of exercise is useful for parents and kids to be looking at, okay, so we can't do all of this. What are our favorite things that we're going to do? What's the most impactful? And we're going to kind of go from there. It's another good exercise that you as lawyers can do with your clients when looking at the parenting plan. Again, prioritizing, and then you focus your energy on those top activities or days, and remind your clients, the parents, that that's what it's really about, creating the joy that they hope to accomplish. Can I accomplish my holiday traditions in a new and meaningful way? Okay, so I'll tell you, my girls would die if they knew I was going to tell this story, but it's in the book, so they'll figure it out soon enough anyway. So I decided around the holidays that at Christmas time, I was going to create a new holiday tradition. We were going to go and chop down the tree, and it was going to be romantic and lovely and magical. So, and my mom is a good sport because I absolutely drag her around to all of these things that I always think are going to be a great idea, and we're going to have hot chocolate and probably sing songs together in the car the whole way there, and the girls won't complain at all. So I go on Facebook, I ask all the friends, like, where do you go get your trees, and they all point me to this farm that now I can't even remember the name of. So here we go. It's not snowing. Downer number one. Downer number two, not only is it not snowing, the field is just pure mud. Like it's not white, it's brown and mucky. And it's so cold because the wind is blowing so hard that you don't even want to like be outside for more than 2 minutes. And we have to like ride this dumb wagon or whatever around to go. Okay, so then you go to the line of trees. They're pre-cut and they're just like standing in the hole. Like none of this. The girls are like, what? So I'm like, this is great. We're going to get hot chocolate after this. And the truth is we were all completely miserable, dirty. So pick out the tree. We've got the greatest tree in the world. We get it home to the rental house that we were in at the time. Now, I will tell you, in a field, the trees look smaller than they really are. I don't notice this until we're trying to get the tree up through the front door. And I'm like, it's not even going to stand up in my house. It did not stand up in the house. So then I'm like, oh, of course my ex had taken all the tools. So I'm like, how am I going to figure out how to cut part of this tree off so I can get it to fit? I don't honestly even remember what I actually used. But so we chop off part of the tree to get it to just even stand up. And there's a picture of this in the book. It's standing up, but it's leaning, like, because it's curving along the ceiling. So we get the tree decorated. It's the biggest, it was so ridiculous. So girls and I were sitting on the couch, all happy. We've got it all decorated. And Anna says, oh, actually, it was just me and Anna. Anna says, I think I just need to fix the tree skirt underneath a little bit. Okay? Sophia's upstairs taking a shower. She goes, and she's in 6th grade at this point. She's little, and she's trying to adjust the tree skirt, and the tree starts to tip. And I'm like, no. So she's trying, and it's huge, so she's trying to hold it. Of course she can't. I end up underneath the tree, like covered in sap and needles. There's water everywhere, trying to like get the tree up. We're screaming, so Sophia comes down. She's trying to help us. By the time I get kind of the tree righted back up, Sophia's standing there butt naked because she ran out of the shower, and I had no idea, right? So she's naked, Anna's crying, and I'm like covered in just all kinds of tree. That's our favorite Christmas memory to date. And it was a complete stupid disaster, right? So I often ask my clients, what are you trying to create? I wouldn't have recommended that necessarily. But, Anna's like, oh, I ruined Christmas. And I'm like, no, you just gave us a great story for years and years and years to come. So remind your parents, clients, that that's the possibility too. It's not so much about the day, right? It's about the things that you're doing around it. Can I set expectations that are more reliant on my own actions? Again, this goes to that need for clients to control. I can control my children's expectations for what we're going to accomplish in a weekend, in a day, in an evening. Or am I setting up expectations that rely on mystical cooperation from my former spouse, and he has no idea that I'm setting those expectations, that I'm including kind of his permission that I may or may not ask for in the future? Or am I making sure that any expectations I'm setting I have control over as a parent? So that's the list of questions. I hope you find those to be useful for your clients who are parents. We're running short on time. So I will talk very briefly about what I learned in kind of processing all of this in terms of strategically taking it into the courtroom as a litigator. Very often we focus on the bad parts of parents. Where do they fail in their obligation as a parent? What did they do wrong? How is your client better? And we all know that the best interest of the children has really little to do with who's the better parent, right? Because what's best for children is that they have their parents. When I was working through this project and really listening to my clients in kind of a different way, I started shifting the focus away from the bad and focusing on the good. And that's hard for clients. It's a big leap for clients to get there. But I have found courts prefer or they favor the parent who's most likely to minimize rather than antagonize the relationship, right? They're going to look favorably on who's the parent that I think is going to try to involve the other parent because they're going to see that trickle-down effect of that's going to be best for the children. So I started taking away from my exhibits the charts I might have had of all the parenting time missed or all the times that they asked for coverage, any other infractions that my clients were pretty hell-bent on including. And I just started focusing on them as a parent, them fulfilling their needs of the children, and coaching my clients into being cooperative. This didn't matter if it was going to be sole physical custody, joint physical custody. The rules kind of equally apply. I've had more success in getting outcomes that my clients are seeking in the courtroom by making that a strategy change. And what tends to happen, it's not that you don't pay attention to, if you really know that you're going to walk in and your client's going to get clobbered because the other side is going to be focusing on the negative, save it for rebuttal. Save it for the defensive, like I have to now defend against this because that's what you chose to make your case. And I just will tell you, in my experience, and I've practiced in front of a lot of judges, my clients have been rewarded by that being the focus. So all that to say, when I was looking at what are the intentions, and I language this now for the courts, this is my client's intention in seeking this, or whatever it might be. I'm not saying that I win every case. We all know that's an impossibility in the practice area that we're in. But I will say I've had the ability to open up the court's minds and kind of see my client in a different way when I'm not focused on the other parent's negatives. I'm focused on my client's positives. So for whatever that might be worth in front of the judges that you practice in, I have found I enjoy practicing a little bit more in this area because it's not all about how can we make somebody look bad. Because ultimately the judges kind of scratch their heads and say, well, you married them, right? We've all had that experience. So to kind of address that more head on. So we just have a few minutes here. I want to make sure that I'm able to answer questions that either came through.
Not on the computer.
Okay. Questions, comments? Tell me I'm crazy. Nothing? Well, that's all that I had.
Thank you.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I have a question, not directly related to this, but I don't know, just trying to, now that the tax schedules are changing and there's no longer like dependents in the sense, what type of verbiage are we looking at using in the future for parenting plans as far as like before it was like you would claim a dependent, tax dependents for 2000s,
Yep.
Odd even years and odd years. I mean, in parenting plans, how are you looking towards, what verbiage are you looking to use?
That's a
Does that
great,
make sense?
yes, it's a great question. We don't tend to put that in our parenting plans because, oh, yep, so the question was with the tax law change, how are we now adjusting language in parenting plans / decrees for the tax exemptions, and so are the dependency exemption that no longer exists so long as this tax plan's in effect. I can send you the language that we've drafted up. If you want to send me an email, I can just send that right back out. So what we're addressing now is the child tax credit and some of the rules related to daycare change because they age out at 16. There are some different ages, so you still want to be alternating, but yes, it doesn't attach now just to the dependency exemption. So we've just gotten very specific, and then of course we languaged it. Just don't make any assumptions about my political leanings in this, but in the event that that tax law no longer is in effect and the dependency exemptions come back into play, then we're still addressing it because we think that could potentially be something that happens in the future. So, yeah, good
And
question.
kind of related to that,
Mhm.
do you know how, is it going to have any effect on the child support calculation? Because right now, we still calculate under the dependent exemption, so.
I don't know the answer.
Who do we turn to get that information?
Well, I do know,
Probably a better question.
yeah, the Child Support Commission, I know, just had a public hearing last week. I'm not sure if that issue was addressed. I know that Adam Astley works with the child support calculator. I'm sure he's probably looking at what does that look like because now so I don't know the answer to that question. We haven't seen anything come down yet on if that will change.
So for the rest of this year or until.
We're still we're still calculating it the way that we always have.
Okay.
Yeah, don't know that that's necessarily right now technically, but they haven't changed the guidelines, so we're still kind of drawn under that. Good question.
Sorry if I took this off topic.
Right, so going back to your dislike of right of first refusal,
Mhm.
most of our clients do work with, I work in the litigation center here. So a lot of what we deal with are the low income.
Yeah.
So generally what we see when we're looking at right of first refusals is that these are people that are trying to make their extra shift that they got put on in food service or whatever. They're not looking at overnight stays.
Yep.
So we normally end up talking about like, what's the shortest amount of time that you need to know?
Yeah.
And they're saying like, if you could let me know the day before, that's great. But the way you're describing right of first refusal, where you're extending it over like an overnight stay, that's a little bit different. So in the other side, kind of more what I deal with on a day in, day out, where they're just looking for someone to cover a shift or things like that. How do you address those issues?
Okay, great question. I know we're trying to get in under time.
No, just summarize it.
Oh, okay.
Just, yeah,
So,
I wasn't calling you
For the right of first refusal, the question is, when you have clients who are just trying to pick up another work shift for a couple of hours and it's not extending it to an overnight, kind of what do we look at then? So I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So right of first refusal is if I'm unable to care for my children during my parenting time, I'm first going to extend the right to the other parent to care for the children. So if you're saying, so I'm mom, it's my parenting time, but I want to pick up an extra shift for 3 hours, right? That's the scenario you're talking about. They could find a babysitter or a family member. I'm not saying they couldn't ask dad, but to require that in every instance. So say I'm mom and I get a call at 4:00 in the afternoon, like, hey, we need somebody to come in and cover this shift. It sometimes creates more problems that now I have to go ask my former spouse, who's probably not my best friend anymore, where I could probably just get my sister to come cover the kids for me. That's what I'm talking about. It kind of, it's not the notification kind of days in advance, but it's if, okay, I got a call now, I need to take an overnight shift, then probably a call to dad would be good. You know, I'm not going to be available for 12 hours, like, you want to take the kids. I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, no, you did it in a way. So you would still, when you're talking about the short 3, 4, or 5 hour shift, you wouldn't use right of first refusal. That wouldn't trigger it to you. It would be if you're an RN and you get called up for an overnight 12.
Right.
And that would trigger
Yeah.
right of first refusal.
Because where we'll see kind of the abuse in the right of first refusal is, well, you left the kids for 2 hours to go get your hair done and your nails done, and you should have asked me first. Or you went to go watch a football game at your buddy's house, and I happened to know they were at Aunt Judy's house during that time, and it was 3 hours. They should have been with me.
Okay.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I think creates more opportunity for parents to fight over those things. Whereas if it's look, I have to go out of town because I have a wedding of some friend for this Saturday night. You want to take the kids? And they can always say no. But it's those little pockets of time where parents like lose their minds about it. Like, how dare you not keep your kids like you should? And see, I knew it. You didn't even really want them to begin with. And why'd you even ask for that time in the first place? Because now you want to go get your hair cut on a Saturday and spend 2 hours away from your kids. I mean, it's just, that's the kind of conflict I think we could try to minimize.
All right.
Great
So-
question.
Yeah, no, I like that. Thank you.
Anything else?
All right, well, thank you, Angela.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
coming